Hide. In this movie, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson plays a hardened criminal. He works as a getaway driver in heists together with his brother. After one of their crimes, they are found and ambushed by fellow criminals who want to take their loot. Once the main character reveals the location of the hidden money, his brother gets his throat slit, and The Rock himself takes a bullet to the head. But he survives and is sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, his thirst for revenge doesn't fade during that time. When he finally gets out, he's determined to find and punish everyone involved in his brother's death. The tattooed giant paces his cell, waiting for release. On the wall hangs a photograph of him with a man we don't yet know. Finally, the convict is let out of his cell, introduced simply as the driver. A prison worker gives the ex-convict some last words of advice and a business card, in case he faces difficult situations on the outside. But the only thing that interests him is, where's the exit? As soon as he leaves the prison gates, he throws away the card and decides to stretch his legs. After a long walk along the highway, he reaches a junkyard and finds his stylish Chevrolet Chevelle muscle car. The keys are waiting on the front wheel, so he pulls off the cover, starts it without issue, and drives off to find his first target. All the information about that target has been stashed in the glove compartment. Under the seat, he also finds a revolver. Since prison doesn't teach road etiquette, the driver parks however he wants, crosses traffic without concern for cars or angry drivers, and heads straight into an office building. He doesn't waste time with formalities and immediately looks for one of the employees. Before the man can even process what's happening, he takes a bullet to the head. The driver walks away but notices he's been caught on a surveillance camera. The next scene shifts to a roadside motel, where a man in the bathroom is trying to buy drugs from a dealer. He pulls out crumpled change, but the dealer isn't satisfied. After some bickering, the beer convinces his acquaintance to go through with the deal. With drugs in hand, he heads to his car. The scene then cuts back to the office where the driver killed the clerk. Now the place is full of cops, among them the very same drug beer. No one at the station is happy to see him, especially a female detective. Hayes introduced simply as the cop. Hayes assigned to investigate the clerk's murder, even though he only has a few weeks left until retirement. The female detective disdainfully puts out his cigarette in his coffee cup, reminding him smoking isn't allowed. They're now partners. The next episode takes us to a small office where two men are watching a TV report about the recent murder. When the driver walks in, the man at the desk remarks that Hayes been a very bad beau. He demands payment for a car he'd stashed for him. The driver pays and asks for the names of the other accomplices responsible for his brother's death. But the informant says that after 10 years, the price of information has gone up. The driver isn't willing to pay more, especially after already flashing his rolled-up cash. The informant then tries to sick his bodyguard, a Samoan Mama champion, on him. However, when the bodyguard notices the tattoo on the driver's hand, his bravado vanishes. In panic, he calls the driver a ghost and flees. Left alone, the informant becomes more cooperative and even compensates the driver with some money. Meanwhile, at the precinct, the cop and his partner Cicero review the surveillance footage of the first murder. They notice that the killer and the clerk were acquainted. In the middle of the discussion, the cop's ex calls, demanding he take their kid to baseball, then hangs up. While the detectives investigate, the driver heads to his next target. We're introduced to a new character, the killer. He lives in a lavish house with a beautiful girlfriend, spends a lot of time training, and keeps walls covered with magazine covers featuring himself. As a child, he had leg problems, but now he's a fitness fanatic, practicing yoga like it's breakdancing. After his workout, he wakes his girlfriend, and outside they talk. He claims yoga is beneath him. Now he craves more extreme challenges. Despite his sunny attitude, he's a hired assassin. He receives his next contract by phone. His target is none other than the driver. Without hesitation, he packs up with his girlfriend's help, grabs his weapons, and leaves in one of his sports cars. Before heading out, he kisses his beloved goodbye. He also talks to his therapist, pretending he's a surgeon who removes tumors. The doctor doesn't quite buy it, but continues the session. Meanwhile, he stalks an old man. Back at the precinct, Cicero examines a photo of the driver's tattoo. Sergeant Mallory apologizes that she has to work with the cop, but asks her not to interfere with his methods. Later, Cicero shows the cop a picture of the driver, identified through prison records. The cop smirks, recalling that the driver made money behind bars through smuggling. We then flash back to the bank robbery that landed him in prison. Thanks to his driving skills, especially reversing at high speeds, the gang escaped police with ease. Back in the present, the killer follows the old man into his apartment, just as the driver arrives. Inside, the elderly gangster drugs his young female guest. In a flashback shown to Cicero and the cop, we see that this same old man filmed the capture of the driver and his brother years ago. Under pressure, the driver revealed the location of the stolen money. Immediately afterward, his brother was killed. In the present, the driver bursts in, kills the old gangster, and leaves the girl alive. But in the hallway, the killer is already waiting. Their shootout begins, though the driver spares him, forcing him to hide while he escapes in his Chevelle. Meanwhile, the flashback ends with the driver being shot in the head. Miraculously, he survives with a metal plate in his skull. Back to the cop. He tries to juggle work and family. His ex accuses him of being late and threatens to take away his parental rights. At a baseball game, his son Tommy admits he doesn't like the sport, and the cop promises to talk to the coach. But when Cicero calls him to another crime scene, Tommy is let down again. The murdered old man turns out to be a sleazy amateur filmmaker, and police discover he was the one who recorded the driver's brother's death. They also note there was a second shooter at the scene, though his identity is unknown. In his motel room, the killer praises the driver's fearlessness. Then, in a spontaneous moment, he proposes to his girlfriend Lily over the phone. She happily says yes. The next day, at the station, Cicero notices a strange tattoo on the cop's hand. It turns out he used to work in the LAPD homicide division, infamous for corruption. His ex-wife Marina had been his informant, and he had a history of addiction, though he claims he quit when his son was born. The driver's next target is a woman. Watching from his car, he follows her inside, pistol in hand. But it turns out she isn't his target, it's his ex. She reveals that the boy he saw wasn't his son, because she had an abortion years ago. The devastated driver leads to continue his bloody quest. She wishes him luck, knowing what he's about to do. Meanwhile, the killer celebrates a flashy wedding with Lily, complete with car races, a romantic ceremony, and even shooting practice. He promises to start a new life with her in Pasadena, leaving his profession behind. The cop, on the other hand, visits Marina, hoping to reconcile. She refuses, saying she's moved on and is working toward a better future for her son. Desperate, he hands her his stash of drugs, swearing he'll check into rehab but only after finishing this case. He pleads for just one more day with her and their child. She hesitates, but does not refuse. At this time, to the sound of the radio, the main character drives at night toward his new target. He stops in front of a strip club, stalks the man he needs, and goes inside. His target turns out to be a security guard. The protagonist catches up with him in the restroom. This is the man who slit his brother's throat. After a brief exchange, the killer asks the elderly doorman Joe to leave the room and pretend he saw nothing, no matter who survives the fight. The old man follows the young man's advice. The Rock locks the door, and a knife fight begins. The brother's killer loses the duel and begs the driver for forgiveness. He also asks the protagonist to call his son and pass on his father's apologies. The Avenger leads his barely breathing target on the floor and fulfills the dying man's last request in the car. The hitman, sitting on a couch, looks through photographs from his life. Reaching the photos of his childhood and his scarred legs, he changes his expression and begins touching his old wounds. After that, he frantically starts cleaning his weapons. Lily finds him like this. She hopes her husband will give up his plan, but he decides to finish the job and quit the dangerous profession afterward. Lily tries to talk him out of it, but he remains adamant and keeps cleaning his guns. Cobb wakes up in bed with his son. The boy says he doesn't like baseball. The father replies that he just needs practice and suggests they play, admitting that he himself isn't a great baseball player. He finds Marina in the bathroom, dazed. His lover confesses she's afraid of ending up in hell, the one they create for themselves in life by constantly hurting each other. After that, the cop throws the remaining substances into the trash and falls asleep next to Marina. The fourth day of the story begins with the cop and the hitman leaving their homes in the morning, both looking troubled and preoccupied. Detective Cicero calls, saying she's found a lead. Both of the driver's victims were police informants and took part in his brother's murder. She asks the cop to check the information, but he replies that he needs to speak with the stabbing victim from Henderson. That is the same security guard the protagonist attacked at the strip club. Ignoring Cicero's request, the cop drives to the IQ to interrogate him. "This is my case." Meanwhile, the protagonist hears on the radio that the man he stabbed, his brother's killer, survived and is in the hospital. He makes a dramatic U-turn and speeds toward the clinic. The hitman's employer also informs him about the survivor and assumes the Rock will go after him. The cop arrives at the hospital first, but the protagonist is not far behind. In his usual fashion, he barges into the operating room where doctors are fighting for his target's life and puts a bullet, actually, several, into the man's head. Hearing the gunshots, the cop rushes out of a neighboring ward and chases the protagonist into the basement, where they engage in a shootout. At one point, the driver catches his opponent off guard and forces him to his knees, but as soon as the cop closes his eyes, the hero vanishes. The driver gets into his muscle car and drives away. On the road, he gets a call from the killer's son, who threatens to avenge his father. The protagonist tells him to do what he feels he must, but to remember the consequences of his actions. At that moment, the hitman catches up with him. The dangerous chase doesn't last long. The driver is wounded in the neck, while he shoots out his pursuer's tire and disappears into the night. Frustrated, the hitman receives a call from his employer, who informs him that the contract is cancelled. Still, the young man refuses to give up or abandon his mission. The driver goes to the home of his brother's father, suspecting that he might have betrayed them after the robbery, but only the protagonist's mother is there. She explains that her husband died 3 or 4 years ago. The woman stitches up her son's wound and tells him that her husband loved Gary, the hero's brother, and could never have betrayed him. The driver confesses that the bank robbery was Gary's way of paying off debts, and he joined only because he couldn't leave his brother in trouble. Taking Gary's ashes, he sets out to meet his next target. Along the way, he keeps wondering who set up their crew. At the police station, the cop tells his partner how he encountered the driver in a hospital and barely survived. Everyone congratulates him on almost catching the criminal. Cicero forgives him for not picking up her call and shows the cop a possible list of the Avengers' targets, all informants who served minimal sentences for serious crimes. The cop decides to check on the accomplices the driver hasn't reached yet. Meanwhile, the driver tracks down the last target on his list, a traveling preacher from a mobile tent church, whose sermons he had been hearing on the radio all along. Upon arriving, the protagonist waits until the sermon ends before speaking with the preacher. The man tells the Avenger that he gave up dirty business long ago and now tries to guide people to the right path. It was he, during the hero's and Gary's capture, who didn't want them to be killed. Before leaving with the Avenger, the future victim is visited by his wife and child. The protagonist is clearly shaken by this but sticks to his plan. On the way to the shore, where one of them is supposed to die, the men talk. The preacher reveals that he is the father of 12 adopted children. He admits that in Gary's case he was only supposed to keep lookout for easy money. The preacher honestly confesses his guilt but says he regrets it. He took his share, served his prison term, and found God there. The protagonist hesitates for a long time, but eventually forces his target to his knees and prepares to shoot. At the last second, he fires into the distance instead, releases the preacher to his family, and returns to the tent church. There, the hitman finds him and raises his gun, but he doesn't shoot. He wants a fair duel and recognition of his skills. The protagonist calmly sits still and says the young man never did him any harm. He also tells the hitman that he has deep-seated issues. At this point, the killer takes the gun from the driver and points it at his head. Seeing the list beside the protagonist, the assassin notes that one more name should be there, his employer, but doesn't reveal it. Meanwhile, the cop, who has just arrived, gets out of his car and slowly approaches the Rock from behind. The cop orders the hitman to drop the weapon, and he complies under threat of death. But as he lowers the gun, a shot rings out. It is the cop who shoots the driver in the back of the head. It turns out he was the employer and the one who first tried to kill the protagonist. Cobb explains to the hitman that he decided to get involved after seeing the young man fail to eliminate his target in the old man's apartment. The hitman points out that the driver never even knew about the employer's existence. The cop admits he realized this when the protagonist didn't shoot him in the clinic basement. It is revealed that Gary's girlfriend was the cop's informant. She betrayed the gang. The rest of Cobb's informants help seize the loot from the driver and his partners. After this revelation, the hitman leaves the tent, but the cop catches up with him and tries to pay him for the contract. It turns out the young man charges only $1 for his services and considers contract killing his hobby. However, he refuses even this payment, as technically he didn't complete the job. In the end, he says he's quitting, and the cop echoes his words. Cicero drives to the crime scene and, on the way, realizes that all the informants involved in the case had one boss, the cop. It dawns on her that he might be behind everything. She calls the station and learns that Detective Cobb volunteered to take the case, and then everything falls into place in her mind. Cobb calls his lover to tell her the case is closed. He is in good spirits, thinking life will start anew, but a shot to the back interrupts his optimistic thoughts. The steel plate in the protagonist's skull proves stronger than the bullet fired into it. The hitman returns to his wife. Cicero arrives at the crime scene and finds the cop's body. She doesn't tell her colleagues about his past. At sunset, the driver scatters his brother's ashes over a reservoir and drives his car toward the horizon, while the preacher delivers a sermon about forgiveness to his congregation. Interestingly, the screenplay for the film was written by two brothers, Tony and Joe. Perhaps they drew inspiration from their own relationship, hopefully not autobiographical. For the filming, Dwayne Johnson even had to attend extreme driving courses. But he was so drawn to the character from the very first reading of the script that he eagerly accepted the role and immediately began training.